cultural identities. But that being said, psychotherapy as a practice may be culturally incongruent with the values and worldview of other ethnic and racial minority groups, and that does happen. So what's the so what there? Well, I guess what we need then is a cultural lens, or what I'm proposing is a cultural lens to learn from the client. And why is this important? So I guess if we go back into the literature for the multicultural competency literature, it really hasn't shaped up to be all that it was supposed to be. And I guess there's several different reasons for this, but one of the main reasons for me, at least, is the idea that we can't learn about other people from a book. Okay, so I can't, I'm not going to learn about the book chapter approach to people's cultural identity. Now, look, if you are working with somebody who a mono or ethno-cultural identity, such as was discussed earlier on, maybe if you're working specifically with a person of a transgender identity, or autistic, or maybe a gay person, or a person of a certain ethnicity, of course, you can go off and learn as much as you can academically about that and try and help inform your work. But the reality is that for the average practitioner in a routine practice organization or in private practice, you're going to be meeting people of different varied identities. So it's just impossible to go about learning about everyone's identity. It's just not practical. Of course, we can refer out, we can maybe pass a client on to someone who we feel may be more appropriate. But as a basic level, I like to think of this the integrative approach as a trans-theoretical way of trying to be responsive. And that's what I'm talking about here today. I'm not theorizing, it's not a philosophizing, I'm just really looking at practical kind of ways we can be responsive to clients' diverse identities. And I guess in that sense, here's the model, quote unquote, that I'm offering. So we can see in the middle there, we already talked about earlier on about the idea of intersectionality. Adding to this, I look at the explanatory health model, which is an idea that comes from medical anthropology. Okay, in that different cultures understand distress and healing in different ways. In addition to this, we have the multicultural orientation, which is a way of being, it's a way of working within the space, within the room with a person, okay? And then I have also then the idea of preference accommodation and using feedback on the alliance, and particularly where we may kind of encounter what I often term multicultural alliance ruptures. So that's the kind of the different aspects of this model. And I'm going to briefly go through them.
Okay, we pretty much coming up to time there. It's just to warn you. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'm not going to go through intersectionality. We've already discussed that. But I guess just to say that I suppose from a preference accommodation, one of the ways that we can, I suppose, kind of meet clients where they're at and be responsive to them is through kind of incorporating their preferences. Often what we'll see is that clients' preferences for a type of therapy or type of therapist actually underlie an implicit cultural identity that they're trying to meet within the therapy space. Another way we can actually go about doing that is through the explanatory health model. And that really looks at the idea that within different cultures, people understand distress in different ways. So we have people's inferences about symptoms that they're experiencing. Some of the assumptions they hold about the etiology of their illness. It could be supernatural or psychosocial, etc. The estimation of the timeline, is it the serious illness, is it acute, chronic, etc. The client's postulation about consequences of that, and then the client's expectations about what constitutes, and this is really important, acceptable treatment. Now, clients from vastly different cultures may have different ideas and understandings of what that should be. So we really need to just inquire about that and try and incorporate that into our practices. And that's what I'm getting at this model. The next part of that is the multicultural orientation. And really the key part here is cultural humility. And that's the idea that it means being aware of cultural power and dynamics that are at play between therapists and the clients, and approaching these issues without defensiveness, but with collaboration. So this is the piece that happens in session. It's the interpersonal engagement that we're having with the clients. So it's really, really important. It's, it's about developing awareness of our limitations and our ability to understand clients' worldviews and cultural backgrounds. I think one of the areas where this impacts on is microaggressions and color blindness, when a practitioner just hasn't got that awareness about these areas. So cultural humility at the interpersonal level takes an other-oriented stance towards a client marked by respect and openness, okay? And it's really kind of a powerful process. I'm not going to call it a tool because that's not what it is. And kind of coming into the multicultural orientation, it's cultural opportunity. So these are markers that occur in the relationship when clients bring up something about their cultural beliefs or values or other aspects of their identity that could be explored. And therapists engage with that by broaching. There's markers in a session where therapists will broach these issues. Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're running out of time. So can you possible to wind up? Is that possible?
Yeah, I'll finish up now. I'll summarize on this. Cultural comfort is characterized by feeling at ease, open and calm with diverse others when they bring up parts of their cultural identity. And really taking together the orientation has a fair bit of evidence behind it now for its effectiveness of, I suppose, reducing dropout, strengthening the therapeutic lines, etc. Again, across diverse modalities. Again, generally what I'm talking about here is within the realm of a trans-theoretical approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we don't have very much time, but any sort of comments, questions very quickly before the break?
Yes, if I may, the concept of Western influence being present in sort of psychotherapy. When I worked in NHS psychiatry, every Thursday morning we would have an all-hands-on-deck meeting for the medics, and only about 20% of us were actually white. And we're all actually, as it happened, we're all very, very chilled about who came from where. And but basically, very few of the non-white guys and girls were at all focused on providing psychotherapy. In fact, many of them didn't believe in it, which I thought was quite unfortunate.
I'm sorry, I don't want to speak, but I'm just by myself wanted to say, it's so interesting, isn't it? I mean, and maybe we just don't have time to get into the things, but I think there are things about not only about culture, but about where you might have been trained in a way, and where you might have been trained in psychiatry or psychotherapy, yeah, which seem to be so important and relevant here. But anyway, we don't have time maybe to speak much about that.
I would say that the majority of them were actually trained in England.
Yeah.
The majority.
Yeah. Okay. Any more sort of questions, comments before we stop? We are on time. Well, we've got a minute, I think, according to my watch.
Are you an anthropologist, Daryl?
No, Dale, I'm a psychotherapist. I guess and apologies, I just put some slides together for this afternoon. I hadn't, I lost track of time there, but it's really interesting getting into this. I guess if you look at the rationale for actually being willing to learn from the clients as opposed to putting the modality first, it's really interesting what can actually happen and take place. And I guess I often describe it as the bottom up approach. I'm not saying that our theories aren't important. We're strongly identified with them, but I guess there's just something there about how other people understand the distress that needs to be taken into consideration, and it's something quite strange happens. I think what Nicholas was speaking about there actually really resonates, in that if you go to some cultures, the idea of individualism, and I suppose that's another Western, probably neoliberal kind of idea. But if you go into other cultures, it's collectivism, and how people heal. And it may be the indigenous, go to indigenous side, it's they understand healing between elders and land, and it's just totally different. And it's just about, look, if you're sitting down with an English or an Irish or an American guy that is similar to ourselves, probably this probably doesn't matter overly or too much. But if you are sitting down with someone who's quite markedly different from ourselves, it's probably important just to try and help understand how they experience the stress and therapy and your support, probably a little bit more than maybe for some other people. I guess that's the probably point, maybe to take on message from the presentation.
So there are lots of things there, and I wish we could engage with them more. But I think we need to have a break, and
Absolutely.
we've got a 10-minute. Is it 10 minutes usually?
To 2:50.
To 2:50. Okay. Yes. So we're back at 2:50. Thanks, Dan.